Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today for Deborah Kobylt Live. Oh, I have an exciting guest on the phone today calling from San Diego, Jenni Prisk. Jenni, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Deborah. I'm delighted to be here.
Thrilled to be opening up this conversation. You are the executive director of the Women's Museum of California, happens to be located in San Diego. And wow, what an incredible place this is. It's also on a mission because next year is the 100th anniversary since we as women were given the right to vote. So you've got all kinds of programs that you're going to be talking to us about. So thank you.
Thank you. We're delighted to be talking about them and very thrilled about the upcoming programs.
Yeah, amazing. Now, a little bit about you, Jenni. You're also an executive coach and public speaker, motivational speaker. You're an author. You're a professor at the University of San Diego. You founded Voices of Women, which is a nonprofit. You have emceed many TEDx broadcasts. I mean, you're a woman of many talents, I have to say. And now executive director of the Women's Museum. Wow.
Well, thank you. It's all been, I think, coming full circle. So I feel very excited about the Women's Museum. That's my biggest current project.
Tell me a little bit about the Women's Museum. What's the mission of the Women's Museum?
It's to reflect on the past and inspire the future. And it was founded in 1983 by Mary Mescal in her home. And she collected so much memorabilia and so much material about women that she moved it to Golden Hill in San Diego. And then in 2012, it moved from there to Liberty Station in San Diego, and that's where it exists today.
Right. What are some of the exhibits that are there that if people are go to visit and they're interested in some of the history that's on display there? Tell us what some of those are.
Certainly. Well, the current exhibit we have at the museum in Barracks 16 in Liberty Station, because it's the former naval base, which is why it still has the barracks name, is called Heroines on the Home Front. And this is a really lively, beautiful exhibition about all the women who worked behind the scenes during the Second World War and from where Rosie the Riveter was born. So we feature nurses, we feature those who worked on in factories, on cars as mechanics, and it's really, really interesting and fascinating. And there's a wonderful video that runs throughout the exhibition.
You know, there's so much that women have been a part of in history. And I know growing up myself in history class, I mean, it was pretty much just Betsy Ross, who was wonderful. Pocahontas, which wasn't quite told in the way that we know now, and maybe one or two other women in history. There was hardly any women. But we are a part of history. We were a part of history. We just weren't being written about, which is why this museum and what you're doing there is so important.
We believe so, and it's never been more important as we roll into 2020. And that's why we're so very excited about some of the programs that we have coming up. Can I share some of them with you?
Oh, please, because I'm also very excited. I mean, the fact that we weren't able to vote 100 years ago is staggering to me, and we've come so far. So, yeah, please take it away.
We have come so far, but we still have a long way to go. The Equal Rights Amendment hasn't been ratified yet in the United States, and women are still being suppressed and oppressed in areas, but we're working on the excitement side of things. We're starting our first live podcast on August 28 in the evening at the Museum of Photographic Arts in Balboa Park, and I'll be interviewing Joanelle Romero, who is a Native American woman, much celebrated, and she's a filmmaker, she's a documentarian, she's a spokeswoman for Native American women, and we're very excited to have her in San Diego as our first guest, and we invite the public to that.
You know, I spoke to her on the phone not long ago, and she's Native American, she's Spanish, and she's also of Jewish descent, and she loves to talk about, she loves to talk about politics, I'll tell you, about what's going on today, clearly, and in just as you were saying, she wants to keep it positive, but to keep it moving forward and really shed light on how so many people of different orientations are still not respected. Let's just put it that way.
And particularly within the entertainment industry, she is a very strong voice for Native Americans and especially Native American women. And we've quoted her because her vision is to seek the truth and the courage to speak it. And then she has a strong passion for bringing national attention to the multicultural diversity issues that we are all facing more than ever as a nation right now. So we're very excited to have her with us on August 28th.
What a great start to the series. I love that you chose her. I think that's fantastic.
Well, the responsibility for the selection of Joanelle Romero goes fully to Stacey Blanchet, who is our PR director at the museum and also the vice president of the board. And Stacey has also forged ahead with a speakers series, and we're very excited that on October 8th, I'll be interviewing Sherry Belafonte, and she too is an activist, an actress, as we know, a writer, a singer, a performer, and a great sponsor of the arts and entertainment. And so she'll be coming down to us. This won't be a podcast. This will be a conversation again at the Museum of Photographic Arts in Balboa Park.
Right, which is great because you've got all sorts of things going on. You've got a speaker series, you've got a podcast series, and who are some of the others who are going to be who are targeted for the speaker series?
Well, we have an incredible lineup. Following Sherry Belafonte on December 8th, we're very excited to be introducing Eve Ensler. And I know you know her name, Deborah, and she's very well known for her vagina monologues and also the recent book that she published called The Apology, that she wrote about her father. She was very severely abused growing up as a young girl, and she's written an incredible book on the apology she wishes he had given her for all the acts that he perpetuated against her. So we're very excited that she will be with us in San Diego on December 8th. We've also booked Gloria Allred, and the attorney who everybody knows for her work, of course, with sexual harassment victims or now survivors, we hope. And she's a very, very strong advocate for women. And she's coming, I think, in January.
Yes, and if I may, just for a second, what's amazing about her is, I was on a panel with her on a Fox show, and a local Fox show here in Los Angeles. And as we were walking out, she said, Deborah, the Equal Rights Amendment, believe it or not, how could it be that has not been passed? 100-year anniversary. This is a perfect time for us, a perfect time for her to be speaking and talking about that. What a terrific get. That's great.
Yes, I think she'll kick off 2020 for us. And then we've also invited and have great hopes for securing Angela Davis and Gloria Steinem to speak during 2020. So we're very excited about this lineup.
I love this. I've been so excited about it. You can ask Stacey. I'll text her and say, I'm so excited about this women's museum because honestly, as we know, Jenny, there aren't many of these in the United States, right? Aren't there just 2 others, I believe?
That's correct. When you consider the Brick and Mortar Museum, there are only 3 throughout the United States.
Hard to believe.
And California has, and San Diego is home to one of them. Now, women are recognized across the U.S. Perhaps their homes have been preserved, and so you can go and visit where any of our activists lived. But there are sometimes floors in museums or wings in museum, but there are only 3 dedicated in the United States. Wow. So we are very proud of the Women's Museum of California that's located in San Diego.
Absolutely. So tell me, I know that you're also going to be on the 27th, right, of August, so it's just coming up. You're also going to be having a suffragette parade. I love this. You're going to be kicking off the fall season or the autumn season with that. Tell me a little bit about that.
Certainly. Well, this has been masterminded by the chair of the museum board, Anne Hoiberg, and also the former executive director of the museum, who has actually come out of retirement and is doing some volunteer work for us at the moment, and that's Ashley Gardner. And we start off on the entrance to the Balboa Park Bridge on 6th Avenue with women dressed as suffragettes. We have readings from women from the African American, the Latina, the Hispanic, and the Asian communities. And then with our banners, which we'll hold high and very proudly, we'll walk across the bridge into Balboa Park, and we'll end up at the Organ Pavilion where Lady J will be singing the blues. And so it rounds it out as a perfect commemoration of the voting rights for women. And that's how we're kicking everything off.
Absolutely stunning. So the museum has been around since, 1983. And
That's correct.
it's really suddenly taking off with this 100-year anniversary. I know you're also trying to look to move it, right? Perhaps to Balboa Park. For people who aren't familiar with that area, the Balboa Park area is home to all sorts of arts and museums and cultural events. So, wow, if that happens, what a spectacular area to showcase the Women's Museum.
Oh, certainly, and I appreciate you asking about that. There is some land and a building available on Inspiration Point in Balboa Park, and for those of your listeners who know Balboa, it's very close to the Naval Museum, and we are going to meetings and extending our hand to everybody who is interested in the Women's Museum to see if they can help us to make that move. That would mean that we would then line up with the 26 other museums in the park and be part of that whole Balboa Park museum history. So we feel that's very, very important for the Women's Museum.
Absolutely. And what about corporate sponsorships? I mean, this should be a slam dunk to get corporate sponsorships and whatnot, locally and internationally, nationally, no?
Yes, absolutely. We think so. We just need the corporations to think so also. And we also believe that every single woman in San Diego County should be a member of the Women's Museum, because we just feel it's almost like their birthright. It is their homestead. And that's what we're working on also. We've started some events that we have that we call Mondays at the Museum. And we've had one very successful one where we all invite friends in who perhaps are not as aware of the museum, and over some cocktails and a few nibbles, we let everybody know about the museum, and they are going away quite transfixed by it and very excited about the promise that it holds.
Also, the young women, the young girls, whether it's Girl Scouts or sporting groups, to get them involved and get excited and bring their moms and their grandparents, honestly.
Absolutely. We're very thrilled. At our July 15 Monday at the museum, we had 3 very young girls. They were under 10, and it was such a thrill to have them in the museum, and I loved watching them because they were going around and reading all the beautiful depictions of art we have in the museum about women and how they've come forward since or in the last 100 years. And they were quite mesmerized by it all and didn't realize that women had been a part of civil society in such an integral way for such a long time.
Well, because we weren't being written about, because the people that were primarily in charge of what was being written about were men. And it's funny, I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and it was about women's basketball. And he said to me, well, who would watch that? I said, what? I said, well, that's what they said about women's soccer, and look how far that's come. People want to see stories about women. People want to see women succeed. They want to see us in sports and in politics and everything else. Was actually brings me to another thing about politics, but you have many different divisions, right? You've got women in sports, you've got women in history, politics, correct? Entertainment.
Yes, absolutely. We like to celebrate them all. We have boards on one of the walls that celebrate women in science and medicine, in the arts, in finance. And it's so fascinating for people to learn that where women broke the barriers many years ago, 50, 70, 90 years ago. And so we feature them. But what we're also trying to do is stand on the shoulders of those giants and move further forward into the 21st century. So it's a great thrill to actually even be in the museum. You can feel the surroundings of history, and it's very, very exciting for women. But the comment you just made about basketball, Deborah, that's one of the biases that we are determined to fight.
Yes, we must.
We've just had the USA women's soccer team. They've just stormed the world and done amazing work. And so they've broken barriers, and that's what we're attempting to do at the museum, is show everyone of every sex, race, culture, sexual orientation that women do and can lead.
And we have been leading. People haven't been talking about it, right? I love also what you said about to stand on the shoulders who've come before us. And that's so important at a museum, to say, these women did this. And because of them, we're able to do this. And now what we're doing, the next generation will do more, until there is complete equality across the board. And why not? And, we also talked about men. You're going to be having perhaps groups coming in to speak, or tell me a little bit about how you're going to involve the men in the Women's Museum.
Thank you. This is also one of my wishes, that we start a series called Men at the Museum. And it would be an evening event that would feature a speaker, a male who has really worked hard for equality for all women in his firm or his corporation. And he would be addressing other men and women, of course, who would join us. But I really want to bring men into the museum and get their perspective. Solar Turbines actually sponsored the current Heroines on the Homefront exhibition, and I had a long conversation with their San Diego director. He, in fact, on the opening evening was the last gentleman to leave, or the last person to leave. He was so fascinated. And he said, "You've really opened my eyes to the work that women have done and can do." He said, "We promote them at Solar Turbines, but you're recognizing them in perpetuity at the Women's Museum." So I'm very excited about getting men at the museum. I'm getting that series underway.
Well, recently there was a man, and his name is escaping me, but he said a recent film, it'll come to me, and he said, "I'm a feminist." And someone said, "Well, what does that mean?" He said, "I'm just for equal rights." And I thought that was terrific, because joining the discussion doesn't mean that we're better, they're better. It's just equal rights. That's all there is. I think that's all anyone is looking for. And it would be wonderful if we can see the Equal Rights Amendment passed. It's hard for me to believe that hasn't been passed yet, that's been stalled, isn't it? That, to me, would be one of my dreams to see.
Yes, that would be one of ours as well. And many who are involved in the wider circle of the museum have been fighting for that for years, alongside their sisters and their brothers. And it would make such a difference. It's really why the CEDAW ordinance, and I won't get too heavily into that with you because it's somewhat complicated, but that's the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, has been launched in the United States as another form of trying to achieve the Equal Rights Amendment. So there are a lot of us fighting for what many people feel we already have. They see women in corner offices. They see women in Congress and in the Senate. They see women in leadership roles all over the country and all over the world. But what they don't understand, that all our rights that go with those roles are not equal. Pay is not equal. Recognition is not equal. So there's still a lot to fight for.
Right. And a lot of people will say, well, it depends upon the amount of experience. Yeah, you're right. But given an even playing ground, equal is equal. And you're right. Those are the things that we still need to fight for. And why not? So I go to visit the Women's Museum. Tell me some of the exciting exhibits that are up there, either permanently or just are there just temporarily to see. And tell me some of the interesting stories.
Certainly, and I think you have some of the photos of the museum that we shared. And so when you walk in, you actually walk in straight away to our beautiful gift shop. And all the works for sale in there are produced and made by women. So we're absolutely thrilled to feature that. So you get this lively, beautiful splash of color as you walk in. And then you walk through the doors into the actual space of the museum itself. It's 1,700 square feet, and we call the entrance Suffragette Alley.
Oh, wow.
And so around that area is where we feature the pictures and the paintings and the costumes and a lot of the slogans that go back to the suffragette era, so that you are starting to walk through history. And then you round the corner into the museum space proper. And as I said, right now we have heroines on the home front, and there's a model wearing a Rosie the Riveter outfit, the overalls, the very famous overalls with the headband, the red headband. And then in another display case, we have some beautiful lockets that were shared during the war, and they are messages or pieces of hair from a loved one that went inside a locket and then went away from the women to the men in the war, or the men gave them to their women that they left behind. That's quite an emotional showcase to look at. And we have means of transport. We have the video going that's showing women being interviewed about their role during the war. So it's all very, very exciting.
It is. Go ahead.
And then, do I still have time? I don't want to go over time here.
No.
Good. But on one very special wall, we have all the names of the inductees into the Women's Hall of Fame, which is coming up on its 18th year. And we do that annually in March during Women's History Month. And every year we recognize 5 spectacular women in the San Diego County community for the work that they have done. We have 5 different titles, and these are women who've been politicians. They have founded organizations that have perhaps blended Asian American with the Caucasian community. They've been trailblazers. They've been authors. They've been activists for women. So you're steeped in history when you stand inside the museum. And as I've already explained to you through your questions, then what we want to take is all that current and past history and move it very, very passionately into the future.
I think this is so beautiful. I mean, you walk into the museum and your jaw drops because there's so much there that you may not know about or have ever known about. And it's just very, very interesting. And especially the way it was compiled from a variety of different sources. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there, too, who are watching and listening to our show who may have information as well, right, about women of the past, for example.
And that's why we have an upstairs area above the museum that is our office space, but also it is our vault, if you like, and I call it that.
Oh, I love those.
It houses the collections. It's a very, very precious piece of property. And we have boxes and boxes of documents on a hold there, which people have bequeathed to the museum, which can be brought out during various exhibitions as they change. We'll be changing the current one out in probably the middle to the end of September. And so we have those documents to review. We have costumes that people have given us, and they're all in this storage space, in this vault, being very, very carefully looked after, because there are so many people in our community who want to give their treasured belongings of mothers and grandmothers and women today to the museum so that they can be stored for perpetuity. So we're always delighted to welcome those.
So incredibly exciting. And also some of the exhibits that we talked about, but I love that they're ever changing, and some of them are so fun, right? 100 Years of Handbags. Wasn't that one of them?
It was.
How
and that
exciting.
was one of our very, very popular exhibitions, as you can imagine. I mean, the handbag has been a staple for women's fashion for years. Mm-hmm. And the fact that women were able to go and see how they've changed and they've transpired, if that's a word, across the years, and how they've changed. And yet they've still always held some money, or they've held a mirror or a tube of lipstick, or all the things that we still carry in them today. So people were fascinated by the 100 Years of Handbags.
Yeah, that's got to come back, because I think that was a real treasure. That was really pretty incredible. And also, you know, you're very forward thinking, you know. You have traveling exhibits, obviously, and also digitally, right? You talk about women and women activists, and you mentioned heroines on the home front, women in medicine, women of prohibition, all these women who have done so much to bring us right here today and push us into 2020. I love this.
Exactly. And another thing that Stacey Blanchet has been working on is to include the universities.
Yeah.
So there is a 50-year-old women's studies department at San Diego State University, and they are coming on board as sponsors. And of course, the biggest thing that they will do for the museum is get the word out to the young students, because we want them involved in the history of the museum. And we're also partnering, of course, with the Museum of Photographic Arts, who's hosting our first podcast with Joanelle Romero on August 28th. And we're also talking to Lawyers Club in San Diego, which is comprised of all female lawyers. And they're very excited, of course, about Gloria Allred and all the other women who are coming for the speakers series. So we're delighted to have them. And also there is a law school at the University of San Diego, and they too are coming on board. So this is not something we've done in such a large expanse before, and this is what we're reaching out to the entire community and saying, come and join us at the Women's Museum of California. There's a lot for you to see, there's a lot for you to do, and there's a lot for you to contribute to.
And particularly the young girls, I think they would love this and just getting involved. So a little about you. I mean, you are so impressive. It's just incredible what you've been working as a motivational speaker and as someone who teaches speaking, public speaking to those, to executives, to individuals. And next year, I believe you're going to be speaking before the UN. It's pretty impressive. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, certainly. Thank you. Well, there is a commission on the status of women. There are commissions throughout the entire United Nations and states. Let me say that again. Commissions throughout the United States. But annually in Women's History Month in March, they meet at the United Nations, and women come from all over the world. They are expecting next year in excess of 10,000 women to the United Nations, because we are celebrating a very big anniversary. It's Beijing plus 25. So when the women of the world met in Beijing, they promised that they would continue the work, and it's the 25th anniversary. And I've been invited to give a workshop at the United Nations building, not necessarily to the actual United Nations meeting, that would be a thrill, but to the women who come to this meeting on advocacy and speaking up and promoting the women in their communities, their towns, and their countries.
Oh, that is very, very exciting. I'm going to try and attend that, if not cover that. So we'll have to talk about that a little more. So my thanks to Stacey for introducing us and connecting us. And I know that there's much more to come. I look forward to being involved and to just helping this grow. I think it's outstanding. And again, sponsorships, very important, whether it's corporate, individual. How can people get in touch with you and or the museum?
They can go online to, and I'll give you the address, it's womensmuseumca.org. So Women's Museum CA is all one word, lowercase, no breaks, .org, O-R-G. And that way they can find the link where it says donations, and that's where they can come on board. Or if they're listening and they are particularly interested, they could come to my personal email, which is Jenni, Jenni, at Prisk, that's my last name, P for Peter, RISK.com.
Right, and they can also private message you on Instagram and Facebook too. I do that to people all the time, and I know Stacey is the master of that. She gets to know people that way. She's quite amazing, that woman. So thank you to Stacey. Thank you to you. And please, everyone, go see the museum. It's open, Wednesdays through Sunday. Is that correct?
Correct, from 1 to 4 in the afternoon, and we always have volunteers there to welcome you, to show you the exhibits, and we would just love you to discover the Women's Museum of California in San Diego.
Right, and for those who live near there, I know they're always looking for docents and volunteers and people to get involved. And again, those corporate sponsorships, let's keep pushing that, because this is important for all of us. So women, wherever you work, go to your corporation and say, I'm really interested in this. Would you like to come on board with me? I think that's just great. So
Well, thank you so much for promoting that, Deborah. And I consider you are already a very strongly connected member of the Women's Museum.
It's an honor. So thank you so much, Jenny. And we look forward to next month. Janelle, the podcast there, The March with the Suffragettes. It's the 27th and 28th. Please, everyone, look it up. The Women's Museum CA.org. Thank you very much for joining us. And we'll see you next month. And to all of you on our program, please visit us on YouTube, Facebook. We've put our promos out on Instagram, Twitter, and then, of course, you can listen to our podcast on the iHeartRadio app and also Apple Podcasts, and honestly, anywhere else that you get your podcast. So thank you for joining Deborah Kobylt Live, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.